What's up, y'all? Welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be giving my review and reaction to Toy Story 4, the 1, 2, 3, fourth installment of the Toy Story series. I, like a lot of people, was skeptical when it came to this movie. I remember back when it was announced years ago, they were doing Toy Story 4. I was like, really? Like, why are they doing another one? Just because Toy Story is one of those series where it's special because the sequels are so good that people don't want another one to come out. Because remember, back in the day, people didn't want a Toy Story 3 to come out just because they thought 1 and 2 were so good. And then when 3 came out and it really just blew everyone away, it was like, wow, that was sort of like the perfect ending to that story. And then when we hear that a fourth one is coming out after like how sort of seemingly perfect 3 ended, it was kind of all like, well, I mean, why are they really doing a fourth? Is this going to be sort of like a shameless cash grab? And we're all just hoping they really just wouldn't sort of fuck things up when it came to a fourth movie. This movie's story springs off the fact that Bonnie, the new owner of Woody and Buzz and Friends from Toy Story 3, she's made sort of a new toy made out of a spork from her kindergarten class, and she comes home, brings the spork home, but this spork is acting kind of weird because it's all like, it doesn't really think it's a toy, it thinks it's trash because it was made from like trash parts that were literally in a trash can. And this leads to a whole kind of crazy story of Woody having to protect Forky, them going on a road trip, a carnival gets involved, and Woody runs into the Bo Peep, his old flame from Toy Story 1 and 2, who was absent in Toy Story 3. When it comes to making a sequel, and whether you're making a kids film, an adult film, an action film, animated film, no matter the genre, what's important is to make sort of a story that's sort of worth telling. When you do a sequel and make a story that really just doesn't have any meaning, the sequel can just feel kind of empty and it's all like, why is it here? Whereas if you make a story that's worth telling, it can really sort of progress the series and really add something. It's one of the reasons I liked Ralph Breaks the Internet so much from last year, the sequel to Wreck-It Ralph. Just because when you watch those trailers for Ralph Breaks the Internet, it seemed like it was just sort of going to be sort of like an empty sequel that was just there for a bunch of internet gags. But you watch that movie and it ended up being a story that was really worth telling, a story about sort of growing up, loss, dealing with sort of moving on, a really mature story that really sort of moved its characters forward. And thankfully Toy Story 4 does the same thing, where this was definitely, surprisingly, a story that was very worth telling. This story just did so much great stuff when it came to character development and just story development overall, in terms of things from the whole series coming into fruition with this film right here. In terms of the character development, they do just great stuff with Woody. He's sort of in a different place at the beginning of this film, sort of where he is as a toy, sort of his relationship with Bonnie, what's his real purpose. They really play on that throughout the film. He just ends up being just a great character. I mean, Woody's a great character in all these films. He goes through something, whether it's Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, and you really get a great story for him in Toy Story 4. Him sort of realizing what his purpose is, along with just trying to help Forky out. That was sort of a good relationship and kind of storyline going through, like Forky, what is he? What's his relationship? How he plays into all things going forward in this movie. The story development in this movie just ends up being great. Like I said, a mature story about sort of moving on, a story about loss, where your place is in the world, what's your purpose. That whole stuff ended up being great. And like Toy Story 2 and 3, this sequel introduces a bunch of new, just great characters for the series. Obviously, I've already mentioned Forky, but then just some other great characters that are prominently featured in this film. Ducky and Bunny, a comedic duo who were just hilarious, voiced by Key and Peele. They were great. Gabby, who was sort of a new character who ends up being sort of kind of like the antagonist throughout the film, but she ends up being just a really good character throughout the movie. Kaboom, voiced by Keanu Reeves. He was absolutely hilarious. It's just been a great summer for Keanu Reeves, and that continues with this movie. But then a character who's not new, but is coming back, Bo Peep, as I mentioned before. She was just great in this movie. In Toy Story 1, wasn't really a minor character, but definitely not sort of a prominent character in terms of the same billing as Woody, Buzz, and some of the other toys. But in this movie, she definitely gets her time to shine. They made her a great, strong character in this movie without having to over rely on sort of that overly sort of feminist agenda bullshit. She's just a really good, strong character in this movie, and just the relationship where she is in this film and how she is with Woody. Just great stuff to watch in this movie, definitely. Like any great Pixar film, man, Pixar, they always do such a great job of entertaining the kids and the adults also. There's just so much great stuff for everyone in this movie. The movie is absolutely hilarious. Just some great stuff. Like I said, Ducky and Bunny, that's great stuff. Buzz has got some really funny stuff in this movie, just like how he did in Toy Story 3. But in terms of entertaining the kids and adults, like for the adults, this is just some good sort of like horror stuff in this movie. Just these like dolls who sort of what do they call, like puppets that protect, dummies I guess you call them, that protect Gabby, sort of her henchmen. Just some great sequences with those dummies. That's really like, wow, this is scarier than the Child's Play movie that just came out, the remake. So that was really cool stuff also. Like any great Pixar film, man, the Pixar films that really sort of hit home are the ones that give you the feels, those moments that are just like sad and just like, wow. I'm talking about like Up, I'm talking about Coco, I'm talking about Inside Out, I'm talking about the ending of Toy Story 3, obviously. Just that moment where you're like, wow, just the feels I'm feeling right now is just so damn delicious. I love it. And this movie definitely gives you that too. I'm definitely not going to give you a hint of like what happens at the end, but you get to the end and it's just like, wow, man, this was just such a smart, well-written movie. And I'm just so happy I could sit back and just watch this, because this just as a whole series, Toy Story 1, 2, 3, and 4, Pixar really just did right with these movies in terms of just making such great stuff. Like I said, you get to the end of this film, the emotion is just all like, God damn, man, how did they pull this off in a movie about toys? But that's just that Pixar magic for you. Movie almost got me to tear up. Almost. Not quite, because I never cried during movies, but this was as close as I came to crying, because just the ending was just all like, wow, did not see that coming. Ultimately, this was just a great movie and just something I didn't see coming in terms of how good and enjoyable this movie was. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. Yeah, this was definitely just terrific. I'm not sure where exactly I place it in the Toy Story series, just because obviously I just saw the movie. Might be too soon to do that. But just in terms of being a quality movie, this is definitely where it's at right there. And probably, so far, just the best overall movie I've seen so far in 2019. And it's been a rough 2019, definitely a rough summer, but this movie is definitely really enjoyable and definitely worth checking out. Ultimately, Pixar sequels lately just haven't been doing it all that much for me. I mean, stuff like Finding Dory and Incredibles 2, enjoyable movies, but definitely not on the same caliber as the originals, and definitely not as inspired as those original films. Whereas this movie, it's like, wow, I really got to think, where does this rank in the series? So I'm going to have a video coming out pretty soon where I rank all the Pixar films, all the films from the like 20+ year history. So look out for that one. And whether there'll be a Toy Story 5, I mean, obviously there's room open for it, but I just can't imagine there being another Toy Story 5, given how long it took them to make Toy Story 4 after Toy Story 3. So this will probably be the end of the series, and if it is, then wow, just great stuff they did with the Toy Story series. So that does it for this review. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you for watching.